Greetings everyone, and let's get straight to it. Today I'll be testing the living daylights out of the new Tamron 28-75mm f2.8 Di III VXD G2 lens, the follow-up to their very popular and affordable original fast standard zoom lens for Sony's full-frame mirrorless cameras. Tamron claim that this G2 version of the lens comes armed with a number of improvements, but it's also a little more expensive than the original at $900 US or £850 here in the UK. I'd like to say a big thank you to Tamron's UK distributor for loaning me one of the only review copies of the lens that they had for a week for testing purposes, although as usual this is a totally independent review. A fast standard zoom lens with a maximum aperture of f2.8 is one of the most popular options on any camera system. It provides a flexible compromise between having a workable zoom range and having a wider maximum aperture of f2.8, useful for shooting in low light or getting noticeably out of focus backgrounds. They are particularly helpful lenses for wedding photography and photojournalism, well, all kinds of uses really. This one is designed from the ground up to work with Sony's cameras, so in-camera corrections, eye autofocus and all those other features all worked properly in my testing. It's worth noting though that this Tamron lens does not feature image stabilization, which is getting more common to see on standard zoom lenses nowadays. That might be an issue for you if your camera does not have image stabilization built in. It's also worth noting that this lens's zoom range starts at 28mm instead of the more traditional 24mm. Here's some video to show the difference. I shot this bit of video using a different lens. This keeps the lens's size and weight and ultimately price down. But some people will miss having 24mm available on such a lens, and if you're using an Aps-C camera then 28mm really isn't a wide angle at all. Anyway, let's look at the build quality first. The lens is mostly made of plastic, but it feels much higher quality than its predecessor. It feels much more solid and smoother to touch. It doesn't feel too heavy on your camera either, weighing just over half a kilogram or a little under 2 pounds. The metallic rear lens mount is surrounded by a weather sealing gasket. Also towards the rear there's a USB-C port for firmware updates, and that is followed by a plastic manual focus ring which turns very smoothly and cooperates with the focus motor very responsively. The lens does exhibit some focus breathing throughout its zoom range, as you can see here. However, it's nothing too serious. I've seen worse than this before. The lens's autofocus motor is reasonably fast, although on my copy of the lens it was a little unsure of itself, focus hunting a little bit occasionally. The focus ring is followed by a focus hold button and then a rubberized zoom ring. That turns very smoothly with just a little stickiness, but if you turn the ring quickly then it feels a little scratchy. The lens is not parfocal, by the way, it changes focus a little as you zoom in and out. As I mentioned, it's currently only for Sony's E-mount mirrorless cameras, full frame or Aps-C. Its filter thread size is 67mm and it comes with a fairly small plastic lens hood. Overall, the lens's build quality is quite lovely and it looks the business too. Let's take a look at image quality now. We'll start by mounting it onto a full frame camera, my 42MP Sony a7R III. In-camera corrections are turned on for this test. At 28mm and f2.8, image quality is absolutely fantastic in the middle, razor sharp, and the corners? Virtually as sharp actually, although just a little colour fringing is visible on contrasting edges. Impressive performance here though. The lens stays this sharp down to f11, where a little softness begins to creep in due to the effect of diffraction. Alright, let's zoom in about halfway to 45mm. Again, we see perfect image quality in the middle, straight from f2.8. This time the corners look just a little softer than before, but a good amount of detail is definitely still being captured, and any kind of chromatic aberration is gone. Stop down to f4 for a small improvement here, leading to excellent sharpness. Again, the lens stays this sharp down to f11. Stop down any darker and the image will get noticeably soft. Let's zoom all the way into 75mm now. At f2.8, image quality is still excellent, but now it's just a knife's edge away from being razor sharp. The image corners now are looking noticeably softer, but still not bad. Stop down to f4 or f5.6 for small improvements, but the corners will always lag behind the middle just a little at 75mm. But overall, the lens's sharpness on full frame is really impressive. Remember, fast standard zoom lenses are some of the most difficult for lens manufacturers to design. It's considerably sharper also than Tamron's original 28-75mm f2.8 lens. Okay, well, this lens's focal range means it won't be the first choice of many Aps-C camera shooters. After all, as I mentioned, 28mm is not a wide angle to start with on an Aps-C camera, but just for your interest, here are some Aps-C test results from my little A5100 camera with its 24MP sensor. At 28mm, the lens is razor sharp straight from f2.8 in the middle and into the corners, staying this sharp down to f11. Zoom into 45mm and it's the same story really, razor sharpness in the middle and excellent sharpness in the corners straight from f2.8, and stopping down to f4 brings about just a tiny bit of extra sharpness. Nice. And finally, at 75mm, it's virtually the same story. Excellent image quality in the middle, straight from f2.8, and only a little less sharpness in the corners. Stop down to f4 for excellent sharpness in those corners to make a return. So, if you did want to use this lens on an Aps-C camera, you'll be pretty delighted with the results, as they are even sharper than those from the full frame camera. Alright, let's turn off in-camera corrections and take a look at distortion and vignetting on a full-frame camera. At 28mm, the lens projects moderate barrel distortion, and at f2.8 we see rather a lot of vignetting right in the corners of the image. Stop down to f4 or f5.6 for that to begin to clear up. Zoom into 32mm and that distortion straightens out. At 75mm, it flips into heavy pin cushion distortion, and again at f2.8, the corners are quite dark. You need to stop down to f5.6 for those corners to brighten up, so this is a lens where you really want to keep those corrections turned on. Now, let's talk about close focusing. This lens's minimum focus distance when zoomed in is 40cm, which gets you nice and close to your subject. At f2.8, close-up image quality when zoomed in is pretty soft. Stop down to f4 or f5.6 though, and it gets much sharper. If you want more dramatic pictures though, then zoom out to 28mm. There, the lens's minimum focus distance is 18cm, and close-up image quality straight from f2.8 is much sharper. So, that minimum focus distance really introduces some nice versatility to this lens. Now, let's see how well it works against bright lights. Here you can see that, at 28mm, there really isn't very much flaring, and contrast remains very good. Zoom in, and the flaring increases, but it's nothing too serious. Now, let's take a look at the quality of this lens's bokeh. A weakness of this lens's predecessor was its slightly ugly looking bokeh, particularly when the lens was zoomed in. Well, this G2 version sees a vast improvement, and its autofocus backgrounds always look lovely and smooth to me. And finally, related to bokeh comes longitudinal chromatic aberration. At f2.8, we see somewhat strong colour fringing on bokeh highlights here. At f4 and f5.6, it goes away quite quickly. Overall, testing out this new Tamron lens was a delightful experience. Its consistently high sharpness and beautiful bokeh, as well as its close focus distance, makes it a creative and versatile zoom lens that lets you capture some beautiful images. It's a very nice improvement over its predecessor in a number of different ways, and at $900 it's expensive but still good value for money, so I've no hesitation at all in saying that this one comes highly recommended. I enjoyed making that review. It's lovely to see lens designers working hard to improve their products, even the more popular ones. If you enjoy these reviews and you'd like to help me continue bringing out more, then take a look at my page over on Patreon. There, supporters get access to all kinds of exclusive videos and other content too. Ciao for now.